All right. Well, rather than having to, multitask and stop listening to you and clumsily do a fact check in real time, we took a little break. So I looked up the New York article, and let's see. It says, based upon the petitioners' vague denials of their exemptions, the fact that they were kept at full duty for several months while their exemptions were pending, the mayor's executive order granting exemptions to certain classes of people, and the lifting of the private sector mandate, this court finds the commissioner's order of October 20th, 2021 and December 13th, 2021, as well as the mayor's executive order number 62 to be arbitrary and capricious. And then later it goes on to say, or unconstitutional. This, again, is about the New York Supreme Court, a lawsuit filed against the city of New York, the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, the New York Department of Sanitation, Commissioner of the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, David Chokshi, and New York City Mayor Eric Adams. And then they ordered that the New York Supreme Court ruled that the New York City must reinstate all employees that were fired because of their vaccination status, and back pay must be issued. And this was about a month and a half ago. This was October 25th, 2022. So I guess about a year later.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating. I think we talked about this one of the first episodes that we recorded. I thought I was like, oh yeah, we're kind of heading into now with the recompense and apology and healing phase. And I'm hopeful that this will heal. And I was wrong / right, but I was off by like almost a year, like 8 to 10 months before this is actually starting to happen. Now, yes, big things move slowly, but it is sort of astonishing that almost a year after this should have been taking place, that we are kind of just starting it, right? Like those people were just reinstituted in the past month or so. And this amnesty proposition was made in the last month. The new premier of Alberta said, the unvaccinated were the most discriminated against group that she had ever witnessed. So like this is all happening again about a year late. And I think some of that is just like things move slow, but also things don't move that slow, because things move real fast in terms of it took less than a year to start like mass segregations. It took like less than a month, I think, for the first vaccine like requirements to go into place. Like I think by the vaccines were released, I think by February or March in January. And then by February or March, there were already like strictures in place. So I was like, you can move real fast when you want to. But I think it's an ideological difficulty, or some of the cognitive dissonance stuff we've been talking about. So that's starting to happen. So that's good. But still there's been they sort of made restitution, but there's no apology, which is really hard. I mean, to me, I think that's in some ways maybe even more important than amnesty, because amnesty is sort of like, will you forgive us for what we have actually done wrong? And then the whole article, of course, didn't really present that was what had happened. But so now here, at least with that restitution, you've got sort of restitution made for the wrong that they've been convicted of. But there's no apology, in which case, to me, yes, it's great to have the restitution. It's great to have like activity on that front. I do like that. But to me, the most important part is less the reparation and more of the like apology and healing and forgiveness. And I know that's a little like touchy-feely, woo-woo.
I'm not into that touchy.
Yeah. I know I know you'd be into it, but like I was like, but that's where the real healing comes from. You know what I mean? That's why you have to talk about these things super frankly. That's why you can't rush past the people who have victimized can't be like, let's declare an amnesty. It's like literally like getting yourself out of jail. It's like, no, you've got to apologize. And anybody who was wronged, that whole group has to be ready. This is their burden. They have to be ready to forgive. They have to I think people, again, I was like, people should be doing that pre-work back in January. And I was like, okay, maybe January 2023, get that work going. So you're ready to forgive when someone says they're sorry,
Well, yeah. And that Well, two things. One, even when we were taking our break in this recording of this episode, you found a study from Nature that
Yeah.
feels quite
Yeah,
pertinent.
wildly germane to our conversation, which was kind of amazing. It was just published on December 8th, 2022. It is it's being published in Nature. It's in the accelerated article preview stage. It's kind of like a preprint, but by Nature, as opposed to it's hoping to be accepted. It's already accepted. It's called Discriminatory Attitudes Against the Unvaccinated During a Global Pandemic. And I think the most, just to grab something from the sort of major results page, which I know is a little bit poo-pooed in study circles, but for simplicity's sake, across 3 conjoint experimental studies, we demonstrate that vaccinated people express discriminatory attitudes towards the unvaccinated, as high as the discriminatory attitudes suffered by common targets like immigrant and minority populations. This is a global study, multiple countries around the world. And then one of the notes that I had highlighted as well was that the antipathy sort of measurement was twice as high as the sort of baseline antipathy against, quote, Middle East immigrants, which is generally like one of the most hated populations, essentially, globally, which even I was saying to you, even when I was reading it, it made me feel like a bad person. But it's like, we got to say these things out loud, right? We got to like figure out like this is what statistics are for. But I was like, like as I was reading it, some part of me was already kind of woking it and being like, yeah, but I don't, not that I would agree with this assessment that these people should be hated, or even that I would encourage, like, sometimes you don't even want to talk about those things, like who's hated the most, because you're like, it feels like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then people would be like, well, if that's the most hated group, then the fact that I hate them really isn't that weird. And then, I don't know, but I wasn't even reading it to anyone. I was just reading it to myself. But anyway, just to say all that with all the exceptions in my brain, I've read a number of studies in this vein, and that is a frequently cited, like, that's like a peak or sort of a baseline of high antipathy in the global context. And so the unvaccinated were twice as hated as the typically most hated group. And I was like, it was wild to see a kind of a number put on it. You know what I mean? I think I've seen that. But I hadn't seen it laid out in stark numbers, something that feels more objective than the sort of subjective sensation, or even the collation of objective reactions or verbiage or whatever, and then making an assessment. I was like, oh, this is like a comprehensive assessment showing how bad it got. And that's a big, just gotta say, that's a big deal, because that was created, that's a freshly created category by which people are now hating people. Like Middle Eastern immigrants as a problem is, as a quote unquote problem to people who find it a problem, that's more than decades old. I mean, that could literally be, that could be like, that's eons. It might be an eon old ultimately in terms of the complexities, in the very least, since the sort of founding of Islam. One could suggest that that religious schism, provided sort of enmity that led to this moment. Because I'm assuming that Middle East immigrant is not dog whistling, but it's holding a few elements in place. So then this type of prejudice could become so popular. I was like, that's a big thing to be declared, to have amnesty just declared over. Hey, so sorry, we villainized, a massive chunk of the population to such a significant degree around the world. You know what I mean? That's pretty amazing.
But you slipped.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they're saying I'm sorry.
No, yes, no, they haven't yet. But I mean, in order for actual amnesty to occur, there's going to have to be, or the healing of amnesty. Someone's going to have to say sorry.
That's what we want. But
yeah,
that's not necessarily being said. I wanted to like point that out, not to like
yes
be wrong, but like that's the problem, right? Is that
yes,
we're just saying that there's not necessarily an apology attached to it.
No, which I would think is actually in some ways the most fundamental part. I mean, to me, let's not worry about an amnesty. Let's set up a systematic means of apology, and it's happened a little bit. Some people are like, oh, I'm just so encouraged seeing this more and more. And I was like, I've seen 3 examples of it in the past year, of like seeing people share DMs or texts even from their relatives who had said, I'm sorry. And I've seen it online for a couple like doctors or whatever. People have been like, hey, I did this in the past year or so. I've been saying this and this and this, and I was wrong, and I'm sorry for anyone who's hurt by that. Just public apologies in that sort of sense.
There was like that cafe in Australia or something that had the
Yeah.
I actually shared,
Yeah.
and then I got blowback from that privately.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, what? They're just apologizing.
They're just apologizing. I know that's the wild thing too. But then this is the conviction. It's like what I really think is the case, and this is why we're not really ready for apology or amnesty yet. Is people think that this hatred is justified, essentially.
Right.
People think this is like hating whatever groomers, right, or whatever. This is like a behavior based. This is a malevolence based. Like we're malevolent against you because you're so malevolent.
Yeah, your choice not to get vaccinated, among other things, but we'll stick to vaccination.
Yeah,
was directly harmful to society and the population at large, and put the rest of us in danger. Ergo, the hatred against you is justified.
That seems to be the thesis. I've just never met anybody who has any reason to think that. Is the wild thing to me. Like I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of people, and I've never met anybody who had a reason to think that. But that seems like a popular thought, which I just think that is endlessly fascinating. To me, that's
like a reason to believe they were dangerous.
Yes. Yeah.
The unvaccinated were dangerous.
Yeah. The people didn't have, I mean, not a reason that would stand up to any scrutiny, like no tenable reason, meaning no reason that like was beyond, well, I've heard, or yeah, but this says this. And I've had debates and arguments with people on this exact thing. And I can't tell you how many times, well, I can tell you, I'll tell you right now. I'd say about 3 dozen times I've been in extended conversations with people, and they just start sharing like studies and stuff. And none of the studies support their argument. They're just studies on like vaccine efficacy, right? And I'm like, well, that's not that, but that's a separate conversation. You know what I mean? Whether something works doesn't mean that that's the only thing that works. You know what I mean? So they have reason, and that they're like, well, because vaccines are real good. And you're like, well, but what are they real good for? They're good for the things that I agree and you agree. And then people are like, no. And I was like, no, we agree on this. Like, I agree that the vaccines are efficacious in limiting COVID hospitalization and pretty consistently death. That's not what RCT said. They said they had no death effect, but it was like COVID related death. It seems pretty consistent since then. But that's, again, it's still up to 27 times crummier than natural immunity. And that would be an unvaccinated person. So these aren't real categories. This whole vaccinated and unvaccinated, it's an invention. But I'm fascinated. I mean, so in some ways that's maybe after the actual like institutional Me Too stuff is the invention of, again, an invention of an other, and managed to sell it so hard, so fast. I mean, I think people will be writing books about this time period. Social scientists will be writing, like, this is not the first of many studies of enmity against the unvaccinated, but people are going to be writing studies about this for the next, whatever, 2 or 3 generations. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And I find that what I notice, and I've done this a few times, is, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if there were any justification here, it would be around transmission. It would say, it would be, okay, if there was actually a silver bullet, there's some way to reduce transmission and significantly. I don't mean just like, oh, it's a little bit less, but I mean like, oh yeah, these people can't come to work because they are like, I don't know, 10 times more likely to transmit this deadly virus.
Yeah.
Baked in there are a lot of assumptions about, A, how deadly it is, B,
yes, how transmissible it is too. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that's really the only category where we, and I mean, we've talked about this a lot, so we maybe can get back to Amnesty, but the thing is, I noticed I've done this before, and I'll sort of slip off into like COVID deaths or reducing death, whatever. And I noticed that too. Like there's this very slippery thing where even just staying in that category isn't right, because that's actually something most people agree on, is that the vaccine doesn't reduce transmission. And secondarily, we sort of slip into these other categories where it's like, I mean, maybe reducing hospitalization, because you could argue that's a public benefit. But reducing death is like, There's all kinds of stuff that's legal and acceptable, and we're allowing people to do in their private lives that cost death,
Yeah, that are way less harmful to the people than the vaccine. Like the Be Safe, finally released their data, and it was 7.7% of vaccinated people in the Be Safe database, which is a CDC database that was information was recently released. It was just, this is part of congressional public testimony. I'm not speaking out of school. That 7.7% of people who were vaccinated with the mRNA vaccines had to receive like intense medical treatment. So hospitalization sort of level. So whereas, for example, like high BMI, let's say, can be remediated by like eating less crappy food and exercising, right? The harms of which eating less crappy food and exercising are it's not even worth comparing. You know what I mean? The harms of like an injectable, you have let's say a 7.7% risk of ending up at the doctor because of, then you're like, well, this is, you can just immediately see it's a crazy thing. It's almost crazy to even compare or talk about, right? Unless you're going to start talking about everything, like things that are way less harmful, way more important. And I think since the original like RCTs never showed reduction of hospitalization and death overall, there was never any cause to be like, well, if everyone gets vaccinated, we'll have way less people in the hospital. We had no evidence to say that. It was you're like, no, if way less people will be in hospital for COVID, but the same amount of people will be in the hospital, just according to the data, like the best data we have. So that was the weirdest thing. It was like all those like, and this is even for people who've actually just thought about those things, you know what I mean? Which is like 2 or 3 levels down for most folks. People don't even think about it. They're just like, well, no, unvaccinated are bad because that's what the president said, or that's what the newspaper said, or whatever. Yeah, and I think just like another thing that requires amnesty, open hate speech of that degree, I don't think I had witnessed in my lifetime. Like Donald Trump, like was a pretty like I would say he got close to hate speech on a bunch of occasions, but he never said anything as intense or like out loud as we've had through the past 2 years. And then not only that, but like not just the president saying stuff like that, but then people all over the place saying stuff. It was like, in some ways, it was almost like you were allowed to say terrible things about the unvaccinated or the anti-maskers or whatever. And it was like people got permission to use the N-word. And people were just like happy to say it, happy to drop anti-vaxxer, call the unvaccinated as though,
we're so pent up, man.
I mean, it was like, there's like a lot of tension. Well, and I think too, there was a lot of, from lockdowns and stuff, there was a lot of tension generally. And I think that's why the BLM protests and then also the BLM riots occurred, was not just because of the incident, but because everyone was like sequestered. We had to get our anger out somewhere. People were suppressing a phenomenal amount of fear, phenomenal amount of rage, all of that. And in some ways it was helpful because I was like, oh, there's a good place for it. Hey, police officers shouldn't be murdering citizens. Hey, yeah, yes, let's not do that. So, and then the sad, but it wasn't enough. It didn't pressure valve us enough. But then somehow, I think once the various people types was just kind of allowed, or you realize you could say it, and then people around you would go, yeah. Then it was like, it was on, I think much in the same way that people were concerned during Trump's presidency, that people would be much more like loose in their lips about speaking negatively about immigrants generally, because that was kind of his whole whatever bugaboo. So that, yeah, just seeing hate speech from people, and then hate action, like hate-based discrimination from people who I never thought I would hear those things. That was astonishing to me. And again, not levied at me very often specifically, but but I saw it being levied generally at tribes and groups. I was like, and that's a big thing. That's a big thing to forgive socially. I think it would be very hard, and I think it'd be healing and beautiful. But you think about the difference between like benefiting from systemic racism as opposed to being like an avowed open white supremacist speaking about how, you know what I mean? You're a person who like said out loud how good Jim Crow laws were, or when Jim Crow laws were enacted, you were like, oh my gosh, stop complaining. You're not being killed. You know what I mean? and this is fascinating. During Jim Crow, I was reading this the other day that like lynchings weren't necessarily any higher during Jim Crow than they were like pre or post for a few years. Like that's still just, that was actually mob justice was like a general way that people dealt with their murderous rage / adjudicated crime as they saw fit, which is just generally horrifying. Let's just go ahead and say that out loud. But yeah, to see the very similar pattern play out with that sort of system of allowance. And then I was like, and then how do you forget? You know what I mean? And I think it's powerful. But if you think about somebody who's actively supported or shrugged away discrimination, then forgiving those people's children, it's not that hard. Their children's children, whatever. But the people who said and did it, that's very difficult, you know? And we saw that like post-Holocaust, Nuremberg trials and stuff. We saw Holocaust survivors like forgive like guards at concentration camps. And if that doesn't wreck your freaking soul, I mean, I don't know what will. When you're like, what do you mean? How do you even get to that? I mean, that obviously, because that's taking this to a deep extreme, but it's a manifestation of the same thing of someone who directly wronged you or wronged you because they didn't think about it or wronged you because they thought it was the right thing to do or whatever, to get to the place of like apology and forgiveness there. I mean, it makes the human party a little bit angry. You're like, don't forgive them. The person's terrible, you know? But to see that, I mean, when you see that, you see those words come out of people's mouths. I mean, I cry every single time. I don't know how you can't. It's so beautiful.
The apology?
Yeah, like apologizing and forgiving someone. The actual people who said the evil thing against you, did the wrong thing against you. I mean, I just think that's so transformative and so beautiful. And that's what this whole amnesty concept kind of skips over, you know? Let's just say everyone's get forgiven for anything they did. You're like, what?
Right.
Like, no. Yeah.
What I'm hearing there is, yeah, an apology is powerful when it's specific.
Yeah.
And this sort of general, like sweeping, like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's move on, shall we?
Yeah. And think about the healing for that, like in that situation, right? Like an actual, like a guard at a concentration camp. Think about I mean, in some ways, like, will that person even be able to receive that forgiveness if they've been convicted in their conscience? But if they could, and I mean, you think about even if it's just, they're like, okay, well, that's one prisoner of the 4,000 people whose lives I helped end, you know, who have forgiven me. So I have to go collect 3,999 other forgivenesses. But still, to hear that one, I mean, and so I say that not to be like, well, let's definitely focus on the villain here, but no, both the victim and the villain, I want them both healed. Like, right. I don't want someone to skip straight to amnesty. I want them to have the healing of making the apology and receiving the forgiveness. I mean, that's the good stuff. Yeah,
and that's what gives us the possibility of interrupting this pattern in the future. I mean, that's a lot of where I'm, because if we don't address that, which frameworks like restorative justice, transformative justice, truth and reconciliation, this is the idea. Let's get to the root of this and look at where this came from and what would lead folks to behave like that, to vilify others like that. And to the point you often make, in such an extraordinary short amount of time, we're perfecting the art of just training millions of people to be a certain way. One thing I want to check in with, though, is some of the things you're comparing it to, like lynchings or the Holocaust, were very vile physical acts of violence.
Yes.
Did much of that happen here, to your knowledge, or was it mostly?
No, it didn't get there yet. No.
Social media. Yeah.
No, didn't get there yet. Kind of the same as, I mean, that's why I'm not the only person to make the comparison, and people don't like the comparison, but whatever, get over yourselves. To the Holocaust is great, because the Holocaust didn't happen immediately.
Right.
It was years and years of first social. I mean, like it was like 4 to 6 years or whatever until the final solution was in place. After they killed mentally handicapped people first, and they kind of worked their way towards the aim of murdering Jewish people. But it started really just as like mild segregation. And then all of a sudden you had to be marked in a particular way. And then later on, and this is like months and months later, you had to then have certain cards to go certain places. Then all of a sudden you couldn't go certain places. You know what I mean? It was a progressive system. And in some ways, I think we stopped short of that here. But the ideology was already in place. Again, we saw from like surveys and polls that people were like over 50% of, or around 50% of Democrats, favored essentially going into government camps for the unvaccinated, that people's children should be taken away. They should be fined. That was even higher. Children taken away and fines was up to like 60 and 70%. So people were fully at that point of like, yep, approve of that. It didn't happen yet, thank goodness. But there has been
the scenario where if the COVID rates went up, which the general thing, I'm like, I don't even know what that means, but maybe particularly the death rates or even just a perception of that, not hard to imagine us drifting in that direction.
Oh, very quickly. Yeah. And people have lost, obviously, jobs. People have lost livelihood. People are going to die from those sorts of things downstream. People have lost their children. People have had their children taken away.
People,
unvaccinated people.
What you pointed out was that they've missed cancer treatments and screenings.
Yeah.
You start coming out.
Yeah. And a judge, man, where was it? Maybe it might have been Illinois. Can't remember. Anyway, but a judge literally took away custody of a child until such time as the person was vaccinated, like the mom. Until the mom got vaccinated, she wasn't allowed to like have custody of her children. So it was like, horrifying and physical. Obviously, physical force was used to remove unvaccinated people on a number of occasions. Yeah. But no, there was no mass slaughter arranged. No mob justice in that fashion. Just screaming.
Oh, well, then we're good. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. Well, no, but that's honestly, it's what a lot of people have said though. They're like, oh my gosh, it's like no one's getting shot to death. And I was like, dude, that is not our standard. We don't want to wait till that's happened to be like, well, now you can call it prejudice. You're like, no, this is the problem. Like, this is the problem with Nazi Germany. They didn't stop it in the first 6 months. Go, what do you mean they have to put a thing? They have to put a badge on. What? No, that's when you stop. You don't, by the time it's hit phase 14, it was like, it's so beyond too late. Cause at that point you've already bought into it being A, just normal / typical. And then B, even whether you've thought it through or not, it's ideological. You're like that. Yes, this is as it should be. And this is as it always has been. Yeah.
Well, are there more on your list? I want to make sure we get through.
Yeah. I just want to, the censoring people thing was a huge deal. That is an act of harm. We talked about that in our freedom of speech episode. That's something we need, that amnesty, apology, and forgiveness would have to happen before. I think the continual lies about the pandemic or COVID. I looked at this one thing from the New York Times where it said, new research suggests that COVID's disruption of social rituals and rites of passage have made people less extroverted, creative, agreeable, and conscientious. Now, all of that sounds terrible. COVID didn't disrupt anybody's social rituals. I mean, unless you literally died of COVID. It was like respiratory virus doesn't disrupt social rituals, except for the individuals who are actively sick, and you can't be part of said ritual. But the research, I looked at it, wasn't talking about that. It was talking about social isolation. It was talking about lockdown effects, government effects. And so there's been this whole thing of just like, it's very convenient. It's basically this really big rug for anyone to sweep any harms under. It's like, well, COVID, man. And listen, I am guilty of this myself. I apologize for this. I absolutely early on in 2020 used like, this whole COVID thing in order to not be hospitable in my home. We were going to have, I'm going to confess it right now. We were originally supposed to have a party for basically our real estate agent, for the people who built the house, the whole team who helped us find it. That was our sort of deal. But it kind of was mid lockdown by the time we got into this house that we were like, oh, well, so we just didn't do it. And I was like, well, no one's really going to be mad at us because it's like, well, it's a pandemic. But that wasn't real. That was malarkey. I was like, oh, it's kind of a hassle to like clean the house, cook all the food, have the people over, clean up afterwards. It's awkward stranger conversation. You know what I mean? So we all did it, but it became like, it's just a malarkey. Like we're basically lying to ourselves and to other people constantly. I think that one's it's maybe a small harm in the death count, but it's actually a huge social damage, because we are now, as everyone's looking at, we're a phenomenally isolated, depressed, lonely, and friendless culture. So whoops.
Yeah, I had a friend pointed out, he was like, yeah, everything got canceled during COVID, and now that we're coming out, I'm trying to keep everything canceled because I actually didn't want to do any of that shit to begin with.
Yes, the introvert's dream, the extrovert's nightmare.
I want to see that study.
I know.
That's fascinating. And for me, yeah, one that comes to mind was I realized my bank would reverse fees.
Yes,
like
yep.
little bank fees, whatever. If you just dropped COVID, like
Yep.
normally it's like 3 a year or whatever they'll reverse. And I was like, I just tried it one day and I was like, having COVID hardship and it was like infinite. I mean, it was a rough financial period for me, and I was like,
yes,
oh, I'm over again. COVID, sorry.
yeah,
COVID.
yeah. From an intersectionality lens, it's almost like we all got to claim some version of oppression as long as we were like in the pandemic. You're like, well, I'm an oppressed category, so kind of, can you help me out? Can you help me out here?
I'm alive.
Yeah. Well, in some ways, that also would help you understand why some people don't really like the idea of anyone saying the pandemic's, when Biden said the pandemic's over, although he extended the state of emergency. So obviously he was lying, but I was like, that's got to panic some folks. You know what I mean? Introverts, people who were kind of appreciative of the fact that they had this kind of get out of jail free card for rent. I mean, this applied to a bunch of different situations. You know what I mean? For rent, for banks, for bank fees, for late fees, for anything. You know what I mean? It kind of was a get out of jail free card. And then people got in the habit of just saying it was because of COVID or because of the pandemic, but it wasn't. It was all, or not all, but whatever, 99% to do with like how the government responded.
Yeah, and it actually released a lot of funding and created programs that I would argue we ought to have anyway.
Yeah. Although we spent so much, oh my gosh, on COVID relief, it's crazy. Between COVID relief and like Ukraine stuff, our government has spent. All of a sudden, you're like, you can never say you didn't have enough money to do anything you wanted to do because you just gave away. I mean, at this point, what, $1 trillion, probably $1.5 trillion to things problems that you created. Meaning that obviously, as Noam Chomsky said, anytime people keep saying over and over again that aggression, that war aggression was unprovoked, it was provoked. Essentially provoked the Russian-Ukrainian situation. We provoked the pandemic destruction here, and then basically spent a ton of money to kind of like clean up our mess that we somewhat intentionally made. It's like, why are there school lunch debts at public school? Why are kids not able to get a free lunch today because they owe $18 when you just gave $1.5 trillion away that you never needed to do for messes that you made? This is why politics is exhausting. Like, we're people. So this is why I want to focus on the individual healing. Just apologize. Just start apologizing, people. Censoring people was terrible. We're looking more into that. And then Twitter, obviously, in Missouri, Attorney General saw how the government was involved with censoring. That was bad. Hate speech, the whole projection, like people calling people Nazis and fascists or unpatriotic because they didn't just do the thing that they said. That was really like jingoistic and creepy. That needs to be apologized for. Lockdowns in general. A Wall Street Journal editorial was just published recently talking about how Trump was disqualified from running for president because of lockdowns. He sort of let those happen and sort of was the original, in some ways, partial architect. And those have so clearly been a failure, way more harm than good, that it really should disqualify anybody. So that's something people need to apologize for. And people are super hesitant about that. They're still fighting that. School closures is part of that. And then I think the amnesty or apology, the conviction, these crimes need to be convicted of and apologized for so we can forgive people. The suicide of institutional trust, because misleading public health messaging, CDC withholding data, the deceit to Congress, like people lying to Congress. Fauci is a good example. FDA approvals with no real world human data. Pretty much the same thing we saw in Dope Sick or whatever. They're like, oh my gosh, all these institutions are so phenomenally corrupt. And the problem is those institutions would have been really helpful in a pandemic and would be helpful in the next manner of crisis. Right. So if we don't fix that problem it's just no one who's an evidence-based thinker is going to listen to those people. And it would be like, it would actually be kind of helpful if those people were evidence-based and helpful, because that's, I assume, why they were why those systems were constructed in the first place. Or maybe not, maybe even in the first place they were constructed to be corrupt. I don't know. But that's like a big thing that needs to be healed, or should be healed, or else, this is everyone's concern. You're like, well, if you don't listen to CDC, then it's all chaos. And I was like, okay, but it's worse than chaos now because they're misleading. So then you don't want to go the wrong way. You just want to fix it. So then they would be helping people go like an evidence-based way, or just helping lead people to information so people can actually adjudicate these things for themselves is I think the best way. But I think people in politics would be like, you don't understand how stupid people are. But I just don't find any joy or benefit of thinking that way about human beings, even if it is true. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean I think the institutional trust was on the decline already. So this
Yes.
was the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, and basically the problem was that I saw trajectory-wise. Yeah, the institutional trust was phenomenally low before the pandemic, but then it skyrocketed super high during that first year. And then that's a recipe for disaster.
We clamored for it. We were like, oh God, please have
you're the people. And then honestly, that elevated them so far beyond realistic expectations. So when then they failed utterly to be like even essentially trustworthy, then basically we crammed them on a pedestal that we didn't have them on before. And then when they failed us, then like tore them down from the pedestal in many ways. Or some people are just like, no, they're the best, and then can't, whatever, are kind of frozen in some ways. But it's their fault because they messed up, but it's also like our fault as a species or as a country for cramming people up on a pedestal that there was no good reason to do it. And then it made their job too hard. You know what I mean? Then at that point, they pretty much had to be like batting 1,000 or at least 80%, batting 800. I don't know how to do baseball stats.
I don't know. I always mess that one up too.
I don't know. I just know a few cultural ones.
Batting 100, is that it?
Batting 100, is that good or is that bad? That's 1 out of 10.
That's golf?
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. 10%, 0.1. How does it go? Are there fractions? But yeah, those are just things I wanted to bring up that I was like, all of that with robed in. I wanted to sort of conclude, as I was, I've been talking about over and over again in a hopeful way, that we need to look at ourselves and find out which crimes we committed, find out who we need to apologize to on an individual basis, anyone listening to this. And then we need it on an institutional basis too, as a parent, and also because let's get into practice of doing this generally, right? Because this is how we can heal. We can heal it here, which is like a very fast, big rupture to where people are hating each other to like astronomical heights. But like, if we can heal this, then wouldn't this be a great test pattern? Because it's pretty new. So then there's not at least generations of enmity to try to like wrangle through. Like, here's a great test pattern because we can get into this everywhere. You know what I mean? So that,
let's normalize into, the micro level of this. Let's normalize, interpersonal one-on-one apology and then go from there.
I love it. So I'm sorry and I love you.
I'm sorry and I love you.
I forgive you and I love you.
Actually, do you know, let's see if I can find this real quick. I always mess up the spelling. Ho'oponopono.
Uh-huh.
You know this? It's a traditional Hawaiian practice of reconciliation and forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be easy enough to memorize. I don't know why I'm not finding it on this article about it. It's weird. But I think it goes. Let's see if I can remember. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Oh my God, there's another piece to it. Do you know it?
No.
We're gonna have to edit out this part.
That's funny.
We'll skip to the part where I find it. But it's so relevant to what you just said.
I am sorry. Forgive me. Thank you. I love you.
There you go. You found it.
Yeah.
What did I leave out? The thank you part?
Yeah. I'm sorry. And some people even put, please forgive me.
So say it again.
I am sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you.
I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you.
Yeah. And you can see that as like a prayer, but then also as like, those are the stages too, right? I'm sorry, forgive me, that happens. Thank you for this day. And then I love you. And the great thing is you get to do the end part together. I love you.
I love you too.
Bye, beautiful.
Bye.